Okay. Let's do. Should we do this? Are you rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay, awesome. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are we ready? Okay, good. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a really exciting conversation ahead. Basically, we've entitled this conversation Marketing and the Intelligence Revolution. As we've been looking at how AI is growing and becoming more ubiquitous in all of our lives, our marketing team have realized that there is a potential, if you like, challenge, I guess, tension in how we market our products and services as people start to move toward AI as potentially their entry point into the web. And so this is a really interesting space because AI is very different to the way that search, the classic, platform for directing people to products and services online. It's very different to the way that works. Contextually, before I kind of bring everybody else in, contextually, we're basically seeing AI eating search, right? And what I mean by that is things like both Perplexity and OpenAI becoming search destinations in and of themselves and delivering a more rich response than Google in some cases. And businesses like Anthropic working with Amazon on the new Alexa, and so therefore, again, being the kind of entry point to digital services. Alongside that, we're starting to see AI becoming quite ubiquitous in our daily life, right? So as well as being that always-on access point, it's this idea of being an agent or a buddy that kind of supports me doing a whole bunch of much more complex tasks than I ever could do on one platform. The agent-like capabilities of AI are going to be able to do that even more detail and even more effectively. So that's a big area as well. And then we've got companies like DeepSeek coming out of China, bringing some of that technology for free. So really leveling the playing field. So this is a huge time of change and a huge time of challenge for any of our marketers working with brands and how we make sure that brands can capitalize on the opportunities in that space. And then with all of that, bringing in advertising to the mix is a bit of a scary place to be because we see a scenario where we're going to be giving so much of our data to these platforms that trust becomes a really major issue. Back in the day, talking about social media as a source of good in the world, and that really feels like a long time ago now in the way that we see social media and its effect on our lives. And I think there's a similar arc that could happen with AI if we're not careful. And what I mean by that is, in the same way that we're giving over a lot of data to social media, we're giving out even more granular data to, always-on AI agents that kind of chat and talk to us all day, every day. So as we start to give more and more of our data to these platforms, we have to be really careful because we're not only talking about a scenario like the movie Her, where somebody is accessing and talking to you in every part of your life, but we're also talking about a scenario where that AI is advertising to you as well, which is a bit of a scary prospect. And we want to make sure that both our clients and other businesses that we're talking to, any partners, are best placed to make the most of that world in a way that's human-centered, adds value to people's experiences, and does it in a way that builds their brands and creates trust and long-lasting relationships, essentially to take on the AI tomorrow. So I'm going to go to Fiona first to ask about how the role of LLMs are going to evolve as agents that perform web actions on behalf of users. So thinking about it as how they might successfully guide you to the right products and service.
Yes, I think for me, the whole point of AI and why it's been so huge over the last few years from a consumer and user point of view is that it's there to make our lives easier, and people are all about how we make our lives as easy as possible. So I think The more that people use it and they see how much easier their lives are becoming, the more likely they are to use that as a bit of an entry point whenever they go online. So for things like travel or even just sort of hospitality generally, you know, booking a restaurant or booking a trip away somewhere, it makes things much more efficient, it makes things much more personalised because I can have that one-on-one conversation with it to further refine what it is that I'm looking for. So it being able to create something that's completely dynamic and completely personalised to me is why I use it and why I'll continue to use it.
So therefore, like in that scenario, at the moment, it's giving you just stuff that it's found on the internet. There is no sort of middleman saying, actually, I'm going to pay you more if you promote my thing.
Yeah.
So in the event that that starts to happen, how does it change our understanding of this model and what opportunities do you think it raises?
From a marketing point of view?
Yeah, well, yeah, basically, yeah.
Marketing fundamentally has never changed. Even if you look back to the fundamental principles of it in the late 1800s, actually how we go about speaking to people is all about understanding what it is that they're looking for, who are the right people for us to talk to, what is the right message for us to communicate to a particular group of people. And it's always been about testing and learning to decipher exactly what it is that's resonating most with an audience. And that is not going to change. I think it's just how we go about doing that and how we go about communicating with that audience that is the part that will potentially evolve.
So essentially, I think what you're saying is essentially if the core value of trying to connect the right product with the right person is maintained, then there isn't really an issue of trust.
I don't think it's necessarily that we can entirely trust these things, and I think any time you involve some sort of payment for something to try to target a group of people, there are always people who are going to want to capitalise on that and use that to their advantage, which can be to the disadvantage of others. So I'm not necessarily saying that it's something that we should all completely trust and just continue to throw all of our information at, but I think what I am saying is that as responsible marketers and ethical marketers, we can use it in a good way and in the right way, and it should be an evolution of what we're already doing.
The other interesting part of this is we're talking about a dynamic which is kind of on the up and up, right? So this idea that people use a chatbot as their access point to the internet is sort of quite new. I think a lot of people aren't really doing that all the time yet. But I know that Google is already, how would you say, quaking in their boots a little bit? Desperately trying to protect their business. Certainly there's a sense of it creating a competition for how one accesses data, how one accesses products and services online, whether Google transforms itself entirely into the same model or maintains some of the sort of search drive. There's definitely that competition. So Tommy, how do you see that competition coming to pass and kind of like playing out, if you like, over the next few years?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Google is quaking in their boots. They've invested, I think, $8 billion is the latest round of investment in AI in general. They're definitely worried about it and they're adopting it as much as they can do. I think for me, though, the reason I don't think they're going to lose their control or the monopoly of the situation they've got just now is because it's the size of them. It is a business. They've also got a GDP bigger than most countries. It's ridiculous. But I mean, you look at, so for example, DuckDuckGo, 12 years ago, their market share was 1%. 12 years ago, it's now 2%. And that's hundreds of millions of pounds of investment and growth, and they've grown from 1% to 2%. You look at the court case in America just now, the Department of Justice, they're a monopoly. They are. You look at the stats, they've got 98% of all mobile searches are done through Google phone or browser. So they're massive.
I think what is interesting is that also Google, through their partnerships, that's really what the court case was about. It's not really about monopoly in the sense that it's the only option for search, but they have these agreements with people like Apple, where it's the default browser when you get an Apple product. So Apple makes £20 billion a year based on Google being that default. And I just think that amount of money and that control and that monopoly that they've currently got, no matter who comes into the space and what they offer, Google will find a way, through the brand recognition that they've already built and just that familiarity, I don't think you're going to see that shift. It might change, the people will come and go, but I think Google will find a way through mergers and acquisitions or just by being the one who's investing the most money.
So yeah, fair. I mean, there is a sense of will they fight their way through it?
Yeah. I think if we say, will Google still exist in 10 years' time, I've no doubt that Google as a company will exist in 10 years' time, but I think the potentially more interesting question is around Google search specifically, and the search engine. Will that exist in 10 years' time? And I would argue that probably not, it won't exist. And I think that search engines have already seen huge competition in the last 10, 15 years from the likes of social media platforms, and younger generations now don't actually use search engines in the same way that our generation do. And I think that's because we all grew up with it being a new shiny thing, that's how we all used the internet, and it was the kind of gateway for us using the internet. Anything that you did, you Googled it. Whereas now I think, and I'm pointing to much younger Bevan here, I think the way that younger generations use platforms is completely different to the way that we do. And so I think that Google search generally was starting to kind of dip in terms of its popularity, particularly for younger people, because they're going to platforms like TikTok and stuff like that and using that as a source of information. And in the past, you said that they do tend to just go out and buy their competitors, or they merge with somebody and stuff like that. And so I'm sure that they will start to do that. But I think the scale of some of the startups and the level of openness that they have is going to be really interesting for users. Honestly, I think that Google search will still exist in 10 years. I honestly don't think it will.
But it is fair that younger folk, sort of, I suppose, grown up much more with that kind of stuff at your fingertips, maybe use it in a different way. What do you think about this?
Especially things like TikTok do it quite well, in that they have the AI, they have people's recommendations. It's like an FAQ system as well. It's a lot of just about quickness, and if you have a question, you can go on. A lot of the time it will recommend people's questions that might be very similar to yours. When you go onto Google, you can search something, but a lot of the time it's 4 different URLs and you need to just decide what one would be best, which isn't hard, but you can see someone who's in a similar position to you or who has been, and they explain it from a point of view where you would understand, whereas on Google I think it's a lot of expertise. You kind of don't fully understand something that you're searching for. And even things like products, TikTok has TikTok Shop. It's constantly being pushed at you even when you don't kind of recognise that it is, so that when you go on and you think, oh yeah, that's great, it's also because you've seen it 6 times. But it's also just in a way that's a lot more fun than kind of a display ad at the side of whatever you're looking for. So I think in that case, people just tend not to go so much to Google because it's just pages and pages of endless answers.
I totally agree. I think that there's a huge issue that's not with Google per se, it's with the sites that you tend to go, tend to be up the top, and quite often find yourself going through sites that have no relevance or, not effective, and it's quite frustrating. In terms of the AI agent type model, do you use those sorts of things, and how do you use
using it like a search engine? Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's just kind of, you can stay on one platform to understand how to improve what it's saying, kind of change what it's saying without having to completely start again. It kind of keeps that chain of what you're asking. And
potentially learns from you as well, right? You expect the next time for it to be like, oh yeah, you like that kind of thing. And
when you kind of, it keeps a history, a lot of these kind of different platforms. So when you've thought that's exactly what I'm looking for, this is the process in which I've done it, you can go back and replicate that for a different topic or something else, and it can give you very similar results. So you kind of can just copy and paste, and again streamlines the processes of having to go and individually Google.
Do you know, I had a use case that's like that the other day. It was really, I don't know if everybody has this, but when you travel and you go to a new city and you're like, where's a cool bar? Have you ever done that? Search for a cool bar. A cool bar is different for everybody, right? How do you find a cool bar? And it strikes me that the sort of interactions, the sort of much more human, if you like, conversation that you would have that I have with my ChatGPT, which is called Pip. But anyway, we don't need to go into that. The conversation I have is much more like what my likes and dislikes and that kind of stuff. So I would actually trust that platform to be able to find me a cool bar in a way that Google might not.
I actually think I probably wouldn't use AI to help me with that, whereas I would look on social, not necessarily TikTok, I'm more of an Instagram person, but for me, what I would be looking for in a cool bar, I kind of need to see visually. So I also think it's maybe the depending on what it is you're looking for, it's the format that's being presented back to you is probably a lot to do with how useful you find it and how much you want to engage with it.
And the ability to present things in different formats.
Exactly.
I actually noticed the other day that OpenAI have started to do literally that and start to do, it started to kind of give me different types of results, lists and so on. Yeah. I'm interested then, Tommy, to come back to you. Sorry, Martin, we'll get to you, don't worry. How do you see those strategies changing or, evolving as people start to work it or interact in different ways?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is what AI is really good at is top of the funnel stuff. It's informational, it's answers, but this is things that I think social media and YouTube have been good at for years. Like, how do I hang this shelf? You go on YouTube. Where's the best bar? You go on TikTok or anything like that. So I think that the top of funnel strategy has changed and it's shifting away from organic results, which I understand, and I think that's a part of how the strategy can change. I think from a paid perspective, we don't really know what AI paid is going to look like. Google started putting their own ads in AI overviews as well, so it is something that's happening more and more. And they're actually monetizing AI overviews as much as they do traditional search now, so they're already starting to do it. So it's obviously going to be something they continue to explore. But in terms of our strategies, I think we almost have to have two separate ones for different parts of the funnel. The top of funnel experience is completely different, and I think something that's interesting is when we're speaking about TikTok and AI as a gateway. I think that's what it is. I think it's a gateway to your search. I think it's the first step on your journey. So optimizing for that and making sure we do have presence and we have understanding of it and we can evaluate if it is working for us. That is something that is integral to that search journey. But again, not going back to the Google's dead versus Google's not dead, but that second component of the search, that middle funnel, I want to now book a seat in that bar, I want to book a hotel. That's what I don't see going away. The biggest example I can say why I think that won't happen is amongst everyone, how much do you use voice search to pay for things, to buy things? Like you probably do because you're a future man. But for me, I think the reason I don't use voice search to order things or to pay for things is choice. And I don't think you get that. And I don't think AI gives you that choice yet.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is the yet. I got ChatGPT to do a simulation for me this morning where I wanted it to book me a hotel in Melbourne. And I went through a series of, you're right, I started that conversation off as, notice I said conversation, not search. I started that conversation off very informational, very broad, I'm looking for a hotel in Melbourne. And that is very upper funnel, absolutely. But then as the information is presented back to me, it then actually starts to ask me questions that help me define exactly what it is that I'm looking for. So how many people are going? What dates is it I'm looking for? Am I looking for somewhere with a pool, or does it have to have a restaurant? Do I want it to be in a busy place or a quieter place? And I think the more it starts to do that, and then based on all of that criteria, it then presents back to me, well, here are some potential hotels that you might want to look at. Now, you're right, at the moment, if I wanted to see what the hotel room looked like, or I wanted to check out the spa or whatever, then I might have to go off and have a look at that kind of stuff. But it then still gave me enough information. I asked it to go and search for particular dates, give me back a price, and tell me a bit more about the location and things like that. And once it had done that, it basically gave me two options at the end of it that I felt, these are really good, valid options. Now, to go back to the trust thing, I'm not 100% sure that I would at this stage be like, yeah, cool, go for it, go book that for me, or send me a link directly into the booking engine. But I think we will get there, and I don't think it's that far away from us being able to do that. And I think it's being able to give me a full itinerary for my holiday and all of these kind of things. We're not there yet, but I don't think that we're far off at actually being able to satisfy users the entire way through.
You remember having conversations like, nobody's going to be making high-value purchases on their phones, right?
Yeah.
Or
nobody's, your watch.
Nobody's going to be tapping their watch to pay for stuff. Or nobody's going to be advertising luxury products on social media. All of those things are conversations that we've had probably within 15 years, right? And I think that we have to all remember the speed that things move as people start to get used to them. It's really about the value that they continually offer, right? So, clearly, the AI models that exist right now and the companies that exist, they want to play for the full funnel. But I want to come to you, Martin, because that play for the full funnel is scary right now. That idea of we all become very, very comfortable with essentially an AI listening to us all the time and being able to offer suggestions all the time and listening to us all the time and making judgments based on that all the time. That's a very, very high level of data openness and huge amount of trust issues.
Yeah. I mean, it probably falls into two pots in terms of there's the agents that commerce will create. So in Fiona's example, the booking.coms and the Skyscanners could create agents that ultimately help finish that job. Albeit, again, you're starting to see an internet in a box. You're seeing what they choose to show you. And that's fine, and you can enter that conversation out. And you could still do it in an anonymous sense with OpenAI or whoever and get to the end result that was achieved, as in I get somewhere by answering questions. But you can detach yourself from that conversation and they don't know who you are again. And that's fine, you achieve your goal once those other agents are in place to finish the job. The utopia that the companies are going to push on us is to say, you don't even need to do half of that. By involving a personal agent in your life, it already knows all of that stuff from all the other interactions you've had. So the questions become half. I already have your credit card details. I already know what you like. I know what you like for a cool bar. I know the kind of things you've been before. You just say Melbourne and it goes bing, done.
Yeah.
That's very enticing from a consumer's perspective, but where we have, just as we've had with social media, the partial handover of your privacy, the total handover of your privacy. Because the models and the platforms already can't really say how these things work and how they're storing data. They can't reasonably say they can gatekeep your data privately because it's naturally learning a model. It's already been proven that you can find patterns in the LLM outputs that lead you back to personalized data in the first place. We as consumers are going to go through a phase of the platforms, and Google's going to be one of those platforms. They literally said this week, their goal is that we all have a personal agent. You can totally see how they would monetize that path, but they would also do what all companies do, is monetize the data that they collect. That part is as yet unwritten in terms of how much we're going to embrace it. Generally speaking, the cookie laws and the privacy and everything says that the consumer is going to walk into it blindly and just do it, because we already have and we'll probably do it again. Because for the path of least resistance, it's already been seen that OpenAI is willing to just throw the rule book out to win this game. And all the others are following suit. So how far are they going to take it? We can see with the US administration right now, they're pretty much going to let them do whatever they want. So it is going to be down to us, the consumer. Probably the EU, because they always tend to like to take a more conservative stance. But we are going to go through a period of an intense throwaway of personal privacy in exchange for probably some sort of utility. But again, is that utility borne by the advertisers that sit behind what you're asking for? They're getting an exchange of data and also your business out of it. That model is as yet unwritten, but it's, we as consumers and marketers going to have to keep our eyes wide open, because that's going to be the pivotal shift that brings you to a Google-less world, an Instagram-less, TikTok-less world, because your agent is serving all of that content, audio, visual, other suggestions.
Where does that leave advertisers right now? If I'm in business, we've got a lot of travel sector clients, for example. They worry about Google ads, they worry about OTAs, and we're talking about a world where maybe all of those things don't exist anymore, which is, it sounds like it's science fiction, but it's really not. It's maybe in the next couple of years. Where does that leave a company in terms of creating a marketing strategy for the future?
Radical openness, I guess. At the end of the day, if you're a corporate wanting to sell things, and whatever your thing happens to be, lay out everything that somebody might be interested in that product or service in a structured fashion, much in the same way that Google would have structured markup and all the rest of it. It's been proven, I think it was literally last week, that Meta got found out for downloading 80 terabytes of books to furnish their model. They need data. They need data in a way that they can understand structured and to some degree unstructured. So that's your starter for 10. So at least if nothing else, when somebody wants to engage on a topic that might be related to your product or service, it has as much information about your thing as is possible. Secondarily, if there's an agent that sits behind that then services it much in the way that would finish the job that Fiona was talking about, that says, okay, hopefully I've given you an exciting view on my product or service, now let's finish the job, and I can hand that off seamlessly. And if there's a monetary exchange element to that, then that's there. As Tommy intimated, Google's already starting to evolve its paid model, and you can absolutely see how you could bend the paid search model into a prompt-based environment.
Yes, absolutely, because it just needs to be more granular, perhaps.
Yes, and the buttons when you press and all the rest of it will be different. So I think continuing to do absolute marketing best practice from that side of things is huge. And to be as open with your product, service, and its capabilities and everything else possible. Making sure an AI can understand the world in which your products and services operates in, and there is a way for the AI to themselves monetize that journey further through some mechanism or another, is going to get you in a place where you're going to be lent on. So, in the travel example, if Booking.com, for argument's sake, is the first to line with a completely full-sized interface that could absolutely finish the job, take credit card details, book your flights, book your transport, your guides, your tours, and all the rest of it, and do so in a conversational manner, and OpenAI gets some money and you get an output, they're ahead.
And I think that's the difficulty, isn't it, for brands and for marketers, is actually trying to stay ahead and figure out what might happen next, because it's changing all the time and constantly evolving all the time. But I think not only do we need to try and understand how consumers are evolving, but we need to try to stay ahead of how the platforms themselves are all evolving as well. But like I said earlier on, I think if you're developing a marketing strategy for an AI platform, or a marketing strategy for Google, or a marketing strategy for TikTok, then in my opinion, you've already failed, because your marketing strategy is looking at the wrong thing. Your marketing strategy should have your audience front and centre all of the time. And if you do try to understand, and yes, that might be also understanding these platforms and optimising your site or your content or your social media strategy to align with those platforms, then yes, that might be part of the strategy. But if you've forgotten about your audience and you are only developing a strategy that has these platforms in mind, then I think that's where we start to fail as marketers.
So regardless of the technology that happens out there, it's thinking about the end user, if you like.
And that has always been the case. And I think that, like I said, I don't mean to harp on about the 1800s, but because that's where advertising started to come from. And you can even look before that for the first magazine titles and stuff like that. I think if people are only looking at the platform and the format and trying to position it for that, then they failed, because if their audience aren't there, then that's the wrong place to be.
100%.
So
100%. And these things come and go, don't they?
This is exactly it. And I think,
absolutely.
We'll be talking about something else maybe in 20 years' time,
I know.
and Bevan will have somebody younger beside her being her
Yeah,
sidekick, talking about their
exactly.
perspective on things. But yeah, the technology will have changed, it will have evolved, but marketing fundamentals and principles need to stand, and how you develop a strategy needs to go alongside that.
So one of the dynamics I think is worth touching on about generating content and owning your brand. And I think there's an interesting dynamic here, which is so online, let's say one owns one's brand in terms of one's own content and where it's put, and also the sites or whatever that you actually own. The question is, do brands is there a sort of API or some sort of scenario where brands essentially should be working on creating their own agents, like your lifestyle agent, hands off too, in order to interact with them and maintain some ownership over their experience? Or should they be, essentially just feeding all of their data into the agent and letting it do all the work?
I think it's a bit of a combination of both, isn't it? I think they have to embrace the technology themselves and use it to their advantage, whether that's for customer service purposes or whether it's for dynamic pricing or things like that. Yeah. They should embrace it and use it to make their business better and more efficient and better for the end user. But I do think that there has to be some sort of acceptance that people are going to go elsewhere and look for that kind of information or capability elsewhere that brands, as they stand by themselves, just can't facilitate. The
way that the market thrusting is at the moment in terms of a couple of big players pushing into the AI space, they want to maintain the conversation in every sense of the word. So they're not there yet, exactly to Fiona's point. And I think, there's probably a nowness in terms of, you can create those sort of AI agents to be a tone of voice to your brand and all the rest of it. But ultimately, all that's really doing is surfacing data that exists in a place, which is exactly what all the chat platforms do. And they're going to kind of want to just cut that bit out. They want the agent to surface information in the most relevant way. To Fiona's point, they'll want to do so and understand it from a customer's perspective. So they'll go, I found somebody that looks like this is the persona, and this is what they're looking for. How can you marry that up? Then that's where the personalisation can exist without it necessarily having a cookie tone of voice. It delivers the end game and everyone wins in that scenario. But again, it probably comes back to the point when the conversation we're just having about how much you let your own personal agent into your life as well. You're not using ChatGPT and or a brand's voice. You're actually using your own, but it's a straight line ultimately back to the same point. The data, the customer profile, the outcomes.
So that's a little bit like the model that Apple's trying to do with Apple Intelligence, isn't it? where they're sort of trying to say, you've got your own AI on device, which is completely private and understands you, and then it can go off and talk to others.
Yes.
It's sort of
No, absolutely.
keyed in.
It's also a perfect example of why we're not sure where it's going to go, because it's also terrible right now.
Yeah,
as
totally.
are a lot of these platforms still quite terrible. They have come so far in a very short space of time, but they are still so fundamentally flawed.
Yes, but the founding principles of that sort of interconnectivity, I mean, I thought it was really interesting how it said, we've improved Siri, et cetera,
Yes.
but we've also allowed you to connect off into ChatGPT
Yes.
if it's a more advanced query. You know, that kind of daisy chaining of chat-based services.
Yes.
I think so essentially that's what you're sort of suggesting.
A little bit, but because it's an arms race to some degree, and because the consumer is just getting pulled along for the ride, we're just sort of getting thrown into it. And I think, again, to Fiona's point, there are inherent risks in diving down into any one particular area, because that technology will consume itself along the way. If you were to take the main AI players, and obviously when you put Google in the mix on top of OpenAI and all that, you're talking about organizations that would dwarf Walmart, the world's largest company. And then you never mind the Chinese government sitting behind DeepSeek and everything else. You're talking about organizations that are absolute juggernauts. So they are going to, one way or another, steamroll quite a lot of things. Exactly who wins and in what order and why, we have yet to see, and how the consumer reacts to that is key. I think, again, first principles in marketing will always serve you well. Content data, structured data, all those things will set you as a foundation, and certainly spread your bets wide, I think, a little bit at this point. But make sure those foundations of data, the customer, and content sit there, so that whatever wins and whatever comes along and how far the consumer takes it, at least you're servicing what comes in the future.
Spot on. Right, so Bevan, I'm coming to you. I'm conscious that over the last sort of 10 minutes, some of us have been a bit like, I don't think I would ever do that.
She's like, I've already done
and
it.
I'm conscious that you might be sitting there thinking, well, I would. I don't know. How do you feel about things like, kind of an agent that does stuff for you, and, like the voice search, all of those sort of, how do you feel about some of those things that maybe feel a little bit challenging for people?
I think things like voice search, it's just frustrating. Just put it to the side. It's irrelevant. No one wants to use it. For me, I think a lot of people kind of around me, it's just about like being efficient. If you're looking to sit down and really research something, you would take the time and go through and see different people's perspectives. But having my own agent that can understand my likes, I'd probably just take it as trust and say, that's great, because if I'm agreeing to product, or I'm searching for something that's giving me a result that I like, I'm just going to go with it, because why else look for anything else when I'm all good with it, kind of thing.
Do you worry about the sense of trust though? Like, do you sense like the giving over a ton of your data to a chatbot or something like that to go off and do stuff for you? Does that feel worrying, or does that feel
really.
like fun? That's why I'm asking.
So much. Basically, if you went on to between probably 3 main social media platforms, you'd be able to know probably about 60% of my life, and you'd be able to have a pretty good character profile over me anyway.
Yeah.
So why not give it to something that can give it back to me?
Right, okay.
It just seems to be that there isn't really a negative in a way.
Yeah.
That it's just about getting things faster, making things easier.
Yeah,
and
nice.
why not give it the data if it can help me?
I think it's really interesting, and it will be interesting to see if that's how you continue to feel over the next 5-10 years, because when social media was a thing, like, we put our lives on Facebook. Like, I went to go to the shop to buy a sandwich, picture on Facebook. I went out at the weekend, pictures of everything on, it's not there now. We lived our lives on Facebook, and I would never do that now, because my trust in that platform and others has deteriorated massively over the years.
I think a lot of people feel like that as well.
Yeah.
I think that the way that we use those platforms, is it not
Very
changed
different.
quite a lot? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it really is just what you give and is what you want back. So if
Yeah.
you want it to be super personalised, and you want to go to Tenerife tomorrow, and you want it exactly as you would want it, then it needs to know you quite well. But if you don't want it to give you very personalised answers, don't give it the data to be able to do it.
So I want to ask Tommy about personalisation and data and content, right? So SEO is a space that's driven by how well your content matches what people are searching for,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And I think there's an interesting dynamic in the current, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like when we think about it as a search-based world, the brand owns, if you like, more data about their product than the search engine, potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know.
Yeah.
So therefore, the search engine kind of soaks up that information and says, oh, I can find you a customer, I can connect you with a customer, right?
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting change that maybe comes with this sort of agentic world that we're talking about, where you have a device or an app that's kind of like you're talking to very intimately. Potentially, that device, that thing will know like more about you than any brand does. OpenAI right now has memory, so it knows my name. It knows what I like and dislike. It can infer stuff from the questions I've asked it before, all the questions I've asked it up until now, which in themselves paint a picture of who I am. And I kind of rely on that more and more.
Yeah.
So the thing I'm wondering is, like, if you're, as a brand, how do I create content that's appropriate to that? And how do I capitalize, if you like, on that very deep level of insight that's going to be there for the taking potentially?
I mean, Martin obviously was speaking about it just being open and being truthful about what's the benefit of my product and how does it match that person in that person's characteristics. How you create content when the audience insights are so nuanced and like bespoke and so granular, that's going to be an interesting question, something that we're going to have to develop. Maybe AI itself is going to be the answer to that based on the data it has. Can you help me understand what kind of content I need to produce? So it's not going to be an easy thing to combat. How do you personalize the information that you provide to the AI to match that intent? As humans, on some level, we always want to look for advice from other humans. We trust other people's opinions and we want actual human-generated content and insight. So I think that part is one of the reasons why I do think that there'll be some form of search results. It won't look how it does now and we won't interact with it the same way, but I think that collection of human insight is something that's not going to go away. But yeah, I mean, we're already using AI to do paid ads and like tell us the best structure in terms of ad copy and what would resonate best with the user. So it's not beyond the realms that we get to the point where it just does the ad campaign in its entirety, which is worrying, I suppose, for us as marketers. But yeah, I think as well on the content point, something that I heard recently that it didn't concern me, but it's interesting, is Google just now has this battle of all this new content appearing, being written by AI. And the first problem is Google has to pay to crawl and index that. So all of a sudden their bills are going through the roof because they've got to get a way of processing this information. But then the other problem is if everyone starts to generate AI content and the crawlers are then crawling it and indexing it and learning from it, you've got this loop of AI teaching AI. And where does that end? And I feel like it ends with people going back to basics.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, that's why I'm kind of made the point a couple of times, but it's why it does come back to those fundamental principles. And I think if you're entirely reliant on any technology, frankly, to do all of your job for you, whether that's creating content or coming up with a marketing strategy or a search strategy, then you're going to fail, because at some point the human element has to kick in, and that is really important. And I think that is also still really important from a content creation point of view. If you just rely entirely on AI to come up with all of your content for you, then we are going to end up in a really dark place of just the same stuff over and over again. And I think that's why for brands still understanding their audience, what are they looking for, what kind of content is interesting to them, what format is interesting to them, that is really important, because yes, how they're accessing that information might change, but they are still looking for that information ultimately, and as marketers we need to make sure that we're giving it to them through human-centred eyes as well as using technology that is going to be helpful.
It would be a horrible thing for the internet to head towards mass homogenization, because again we're all just interfacing it through a single point, and then it's going to do all the thinking for you, and you're not seeing what it's interrogating, who it's using, who it's partnering with. You know, the internet was built on the principles of open sharing of information. Even Google, before all the AI came along, were accused of already only showing about a third of the total content of the internet. As we move towards these sorts of AI agents, it feels like we're heading towards an even narrower view in that. And I think, again, it's unwritten as to how the consumer will respond to that. But
and even more gate kept. Like it's more restricted. It's potentially more. They would if they had their druthers, they would have it be more restrictive. Yeah.
No, indeed, and it's like for a while there, they were talking about Web 3.0, which was about the decentralization and of the internet back out to the people, away from those global corps like Meta, Facebook, Amazon, so on and so forth. And for a while, there was certain promises in that seemed interesting and certainly very much for the people. But that seems to have imploded, other than crypto, which has imploded in its own way, into this ever narrowing view of the world. So we've, again, as consumers, we have a job to do in terms of keeping our minds open. And again, whether that comes through search or something else, we could easily just walk blindly into a place where we just let a computer make all our decision making for us.
So I think we're running out of time, aren't we? So I just want to let's just have a little bit of round the table for a moment. If you could give advertisers, maybe our clients, one tidbit of like what they should be thinking about doing. Could we leave people watching with that kind of idea?
Continue to be open to trying new things. Good marketers always test and learn. They always try out new things, but keep their options open and don't put all of your eggs in one basket.
Really thinking about the consumers. As much as having a marketing strategy is important for everyone, consumers don't see that side. They don't particularly care. They just want it to service them and really have a good user experience. So remembering that it is the users on the other side, that ultimately it's what you're doing this for.
As well as the consumer being the most important thing, I think your product and your brand is something that people really need to work on and make sure that the benefit of what you're doing and what you offer really does shine through in all your communications. And just now, from an AI perspective, particularly looking at search, it is about having different strategies for different parts of the funnel, and that integration of the numerous touch points people have in the different channels, and making sure that they all are aligned and that everything's consistent from a messaging perspective, etc. That's the only really way to be successful. You can't just do one in isolation.
I'm going to do the boring bit and say it's in the data. And
Thanks, Martin, doing the boring bit.
Sorry, but I think if you as an organisation, Fiona spoke an awful lot about knowing your customer. If you as an organisation still don't know enough about your customer and their motivations and what drives them and what makes them buy or what makes them tick or what makes them engage, because your technology stack's not there or your analytics isn't working or you don't have a CRM or all the kind of foundational bits that sit behind a modern digital platform, and they're not tied together and they're not talking to each other and you can't surface that data, what chance do you have of existing in an agent-driven AI world where it's going to want to have those conversations at a semi-human level? We know, if nothing else, that these platforms crave data and crave data in a structured way that they can turn it into a conversation. Yeah. If you can't surface that for your own benefit as an organisation, what chance does an AI platform have of doing it? Maybe actually they'll do it better than you and they'll sell you that product back to yourself. But again, if nothing else, get your world, your digital world in such a place that it's open, API built, structured data where you've got it. Your classic data lake is sitting there to go, okay, learn from that and create products and services out the back of it. Yeah. Maybe you don't create the products and services, maybe these tools do it, but you're enabling that future to exist. Without it, you're not even at the table.
Yeah. We are in a place where a lot of the brands that we're talking to and a lot of people that we're talking to will be uncertain and nervous about where things are going, and they'll be hearing things about total kind of global meltdown or some useful new features coming out. All of those things have big impacts on their futures. And just to sort of kind of wrap up, I think the idea of maintaining a focus on the end user, the human in the equation, and the importance of both that human and that human's reliance on other humans to have a meaningful life, have good support, have good advice, have good help in their world is really important, regardless of what platform we're working with. As marketers, to understand those interactions is super, super important in terms of creating strategies. The idea that all the strategies that we create need to be really agile and be open to be able to be hyper-personalized so that they're flexible enough to kind of work in whatever platform, in whatever way, and also over time as things change really quickly, that you can maximize the benefit of those things. And then, as Martin said, I think that interestingly, there is a huge appetite. We've established, we're in a world where we've established there is a huge appetite for AI-powered services. I think ChatGPT was the fastest growing app when it came out. There's a huge appetite for these products and services. That is established. So that means that brands that are most able to capitalize on those services as they mature will be the winners in the coming years. Mm-hmm. So as you said, making sure that not only are you strategizing around hyper-personalization and a human-centered approach, but making sure that your data is ready and accessible for those services, and even maybe thinking about creating your own AI type models so that you can own some of the experience yourself in the same way that people are going to become used to searching and used to accessing data as well, will help you be at the front of the pack going forward. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, that's brilliant. So that's a bit of a wrap for us. I think hopefully that's answered everything that people came here to watch. Please, we would all love to receive any questions that you might have. But thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Bevan. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Tommy, for being here today to have this conversation. Hopefully we'll have more similar. So stay tuned for more of the same. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, everybody, for coming along. That was really good.